Now, I've seen the rough cut of the documentary Gentrified, Ethnic Cleansing American Style. Jason allowed me to check it out, and this is without doubt the most electrifying media project that Black Channel Films has ever produced. I am proud of the part that I've played in it, and now it's your turn to see it. Go to youwillbemoved.org or gentrifiedmovie.com to get your advance tickets now. You do not want to wait. Black people have a bad habit of sitting around until the last minute. Do not let that be you. Now, the documentary is going to open in New York City, February 11th, and then at select theaters internationally, February 18th. Now, February 18th is going to be the big rollout. This includes Chicago, Detroit, London, Atlanta, D.C., Houston, and a return screening in London on February 25th. The billboards have been up in major cities across America, saying that black people are being pushed out of Atlanta. Black people are being pushed out of Chicago. Black people are being pushed out of Detroit. Nobody else was saying it before now. Nobody else was sitting there putting up billboards saying black people are being pushed out of these cities. Everybody wanted to talk around the edges. Everybody wanted to sit around and wait and see if maybe an agenda was going to form without anyone actually having to say it. Just because something is common knowledge doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be said. And just because everyone can agree that there is a problem does not mean that somebody doesn't have to put it on the table. Black people are going to have to learn how to be self-starters in this regard, and that begins with speaking about the single greatest threat that's facing us right now, which is gentrification, and talking about it specifically as a racial proposition that is targeting black people. It is not merely affecting black people, it is targeting us. Now, before we go any farther, some of you might say, but why a documentary on gentrification? I already know about all that. Come on, black folks, we know about gentrification. No, you don't. You really don't. At least you don't act like you do. You're not moving, you're not doing anything, so clearly the point hasn't been made and time is running out. And by saying that you don't get it, I don't merely mean that you don't get it in terms of you're uninformed about the specific history of gentrification as a worldwide ethno-economic phenomenon. What I mean is that you don't know how it affects you, why it's happening, and what can even be done to stop it. Now, the main reason for that is because you depend on white people for your news. Even if you're depending on people like, say, Tavis Smiley, TV One, at the end of the day, these are black people who are depending on white editors and white producers to sign off on the shows that they do. Even if they do speak in black people's interests, they only get to speak as much and to the extent that their white benefactors allow them to. And considering that so many of these white companies are invested in gentrification because the white community has weaponized their economy, that's the reason why you're not hearing so much about it. In fact, you're not hearing anything at all. When you look at corporations like, say, GM, many black people don't understand that GM has a lending division, basically a banking division, and GM's banking division is what makes the bulk of their money, not their auto manufacturing division. GMAC financing, whatever you want to call it, that's where they make their money at. So what do these corporations like GM do with the revenues that they derive from lending and whatnot, their portfolios? What do they do with them? Well, mostly what they do with them is that they try to invest stock portfolios. And what's the foundation of most of those stock portfolios? Real estate. What that means is when these big real estate investors are sitting here trying to figure out how to run you out of town, they are using money from these big corporations to do it. These big corporations use their money to advertise on TV shows, and they ain't advertising on a show that's going to sit there and say that gentrification is a bad thing. You criticize gentrification, you're criticizing not merely where these corporations get their money from, but you also are criticizing the agenda that these white corporations are promoting. See, black people, when they get some money, when they start a company, all they're thinking about is business. Or they're thinking about going and sitting on a beach somewhere sipping Mai Tais. When white people put together corporations, their economy comes with an agenda. Their economy comes with an ideology. Their dollars come with an agenda. And the ideology is going to be, get these niggas out of here. The agenda is going to be, let's promote some policies that are going to make it where there's going to be a lot more white people, or at the very least, if nothing else, a lot less black ones. And stopping the forces of gentrification, the forces of white supremacy on the march to exterminate you, that's going to begin with you getting informed. You're sitting here thinking that you're going to get your information from white-owned media outlets. That includes TV One, and it ain't going to happen. These guys aren't going to talk about it because they don't give a damn about it. They don't give a damn about you. And if the white media doesn't cover something, to you, it might as well not exist. If they say it's not important, then it isn't. Out of sight, out of mind. How ironic, because that's exactly what's happening to all the black people who are being uprooted from their communities and thrown out in the streets. If the white media doesn't talk about gentrification, you don't even realize that this is ethnic cleansing, American style. And that is the reason why this documentary matters and why you need to see it and why you don't get it. This is ethnic cleansing. It needs to be put on the table. Gentrification is not about white people sitting here going, I want a piece of choice real estate. They've already got the choice real estate. What they want is for you not to have any. Because on the few occasions that good white liberals even talk about gentrification, they always water it down. They always talk around the issue. They always skirt around it. I've seen some of these meetings. I even attended one or two of them. They were just do-nothing get-togethers. A bunch of white people sitting here talking about their feelings. White people are always good for that. They always try to use these innocuous, sanitized terms. You always got some white person, never in a suit, because, you know, they're trying to project that, hey, we're just like you, buddy. No, you're not. You're not the ones being gentrified. They talk about gentrification like it's merely a failing of city policies. It's just a city policy failing. That's all it is. Oh, they tore down the low-income or affordable housing so that they could build condos for cash-fluid white yuppies. And the city just forgot to build new affordable housing for the newly displaced poor folks to live in. That's how white folks talk about it. No, it's just an oversight. Just a bureaucratic oversight. It's not ethnic cleansing. In fact, your good white liberal friends will fight you when you sit there and say, yes, this is ethnic cleansing. They'll be the first ones to go, no, 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 it's not about that. It's affecting everyone, not just black people. They'll sit there and fight you to get you off of that point. You need the Black Channel's gentrification documentary as part of your informational arsenal. Because you can't focus on a fight unless you focus on the fight. That means you've got to eat this, drink this, breathe this, be this. There have been a few, minor scatterbrained media efforts to talk about gentrification. They don't really explain it, they just talk about it. Mostly white people sitting here enjoying, feeling like they're being the center of knowledge. But every single one of these so-called efforts to discuss gentrification totally overlooks how gentrification targets black people. That means that up until now, there has not been a single word on gentrification that has been relevant to you. And no, some of your black journalists who sit there and talk about it, that ain't good enough. You had Goldie Taylor do a so-called crowdfunding. I think she did 2 of them. Ain't neither one of her so-called documentaries come out, and they're not going to, I would imagine. And even if they did, they wouldn't have been of any use to you. Because we already know that black people are the po folks. And instead of sitting here talking about, oh, will people feel sorry for the po folks? Instead, what needed to be said was, here are the forces of white supremacy that are targeting us, and how. But Goldie Taylor ain't interested in that. She wants the white producers at CNN or MSNBC to look at her favorably. I guess it hasn't dawned on her yet that these outlets are trying to turn more conservative, more blatantly white. Or perhaps maybe she has realized this. I guess that basically crowdfunding is going to be her new day job. Where in the world are your black so-called news people? Roland Martin ain't talking about it. Tavis Smiley ain't talking about it. None of them are sitting here saying we need to put together a documentary. You damn sure ain't going to hear Skip Gates talking about it. You have been abandoned by your so-called black journalist class. The recent purging of black talent from the airwaves, all these networks getting rid of all their Negroes, for the few who still have their jobs, they've gotten the message loud and clear. Don't rock the boat. Don't say or do anything that would displease the people who you depend on for a paycheck. So that's your black journalist class. They're not reporters, they're repeaters. They're too busy trying to keep their jobs to do their jobs. So what you've had to do is you've had to turn to real media outlets, the new black media, because we're the only ones actually talking about it. You sure as hell can't depend on your good white liberal buddies, because whenever they speak about it, the first thing they say is, oh, there's this documentary over here by some group you never heard of. You don't know what the world their agenda is. They've never spoken on black issues. And they sit there and talk about gentrification as it affects some black people, but it also affects Mexicans and poor whites and struggling immigrants. That's how your white liberal buddies talk about it. Because to them, they're trying to put together coalitions for their own little pet projects, mostly promoting gay marriage or trying to legalize marijuana. They're just trying to put together a constituency. They'll start off talking about gentrification, and next thing you know, they're talking about how there needs to be a bong in every middle school. First of all, no economic policy affects anyone more than it does black people. So for any so-called gentrification presentation to discuss it in equivalent terms to us is insulting and fraudulent. Gentrification is about black people. It ain't about race specifically. It is about black people. And secondly, when we talk about gentrification, I'm not going to be talking about Mexicans and poor whites and struggling immigrants. I'm talking about black people. And if you expect to survive, you better start talking about just black people too, because I don't see Mexicans and poor whites and struggling immigrants ever talking about black people. Whenever Jose or Bubba or Amrit talks about the struggles that they face, they never bring up black people into the discussion. Black people are never part of the proceedings whenever these other groups are talking about what's affecting them. But whenever black people get together, we think that we've got some sort of obligation to be discussing everyone but ourselves. Get off it. Gentrification does not target Mexicans or poor whites or immigrants. Their problem is they're just too close to the intended targets many of the times. Gentrification specifically targets one portion of the population and one portion of the population alone, black people. So any discussion of this phenomenon that doesn't focus on black people is automatically illegitimate and should not even be considered. I'm not looking for a watered down talk about gentrification. I'm not looking for some sort of skirt around the edges talk. I want to come straight up the middle. I'm not looking to include everyone else because everyone else isn't included in gentrification, just us. So that's where the focus is going to stay. Because after the Mexicans and the poor white folks and the struggling immigrants move far enough from us, they're going to stop being so inconvenienced by gentrification. And their complaints are going to go away. And when they do, you can expect a lot of the good white liberals to suddenly disappear. Their interest in gentrification is going to go away because they can't use it as a hot button issue to put together their loosely knit together coalitions. Problem is, black people aren't going to be so lucky. Mexicans and white folks and immigrants, they get out of the way of gentrification, and it's going to leave them alone. There's no way that you can move out of the way of it because its whole purpose is to target you. Gentrification isn't some sort of spontaneous social phenomenon. It's not just some sort of unexplained event. It was a plan. It is a plan. It was organized and dreamt up and promoted by groups of individuals who have decided that they want a genocide that is going to be slow-moving so that it can also be conveniently deniable. And nobody is talking about it because the target are black people, and since black people are the main primary threat to white supremacy, you cannot discuss what's being done against them. I've seen a few gentrification so-called documentaries, and quite frankly, they all missed the mark. I mean, these things are embarrassingly shallow in scope and focus, and mostly they're inane still lifes. They just basically sit here and have these pointless interviews with people in the neighborhood, and it focuses on the idea of, oh, the culture that's being lost, the culture. Has the same tone and tenor as when they talk about, people out in the bush, whether it be, remote tribes in Africa or India or South America. Oh, these people here, these primitive peoples being displaced by industrialization. And they talk about culture. This isn't about preserving culture. It's about preserving people. Gentrification isn't just merely the haves invading the space of the have-nots. This is war, race war, and it's being promoted by wealthy white ideologues who see gentrification as a means to subject the underclass, specifically black people, to a politically defensible genocide. If you strangle people for the necessities of life, starting with a place to live, then you destroy their ability to exist. And if you're not killing people outright, but rather making it progressively harder and harder for them to get the necessities of life, what they need to survive and what they need to flourish, then people are going to be a lot slower to call that genocide. I mean, where are the guns at? Where are the concentration camps at? See, concentration camps corralling people in one spot, that's one means of gentrification. But dispersing them to the four winds is the opposite end of the spectrum, but both of these measures achieve the same result. The target population is destroyed. Gentrification is a sophisticated form of ethnic cleansing, mainly because you can say that it's not happening. It's deniable. And unlike outright slaughter, the target population is moved around. Not on cattle cars, but by the civil authorities. But nomadic people who have no access to resources die out pretty damn quick. And that's the whole point of gentrification. You won't see your good white liberals presenting any documentary on gentrification that says this, because most of them are in on it. Jon Stewart could do a documentary about the Middle East. Bill the Bigot Maher could do a documentary about religion. And Bill Moyers can do documentaries about stuff that don't even matter. He did one about Rikers Island, but again, he's showing his white cred. He'll talk around the edges of it. He'll talk around the edges of the racial aspect, but he ain't coming straight up the middle. And by ignoring the fact that black people are being targeted by this, what that means is, even if you sit there and put so-called policies in place that are supposed to stymie gentrification, it's not going to stop it being moved against black people because you're not protecting the people who are being targeted. Your good white liberal friends pretend to talk about gentrification because they know that you will let them get away with not doing anything. You're going to be so happy that some white folks acknowledge your existence that you'll let them get away with saying a few sympathetic words. And to you, this is going to be what qualifies as reassuring. Because if some white folks are talking about you, that means that they know about your plight, and somewhere out there must be some white folks who are doing something about it, right? Wrong. That is a total lie. When you got some white person standing in front of you talking about gentrification, that's all they're going to do about it. They're going to sit there and say, oh, what a shame. And when you stand up and say, well, here's what we ought to do about it, they're going to sit there and shout you down and tell you, oh, no, that's not going to work. Fighting gentrification isn't going to work. That's the message. So we have to accept the fact that when it comes to talking about gentrification, if gentrification is important to you, then you need to start getting your information from black people, specifically new black media, individuals who have a vested interest in talking about the things that are relevant to you. The gentrification documentary debuts in New York City February 11th, and then February 18th at select theaters nationwide. Click on the links in the description so you can find the location near you, because these are not going to be merely screenings, they're also going to be networking events. You will be able to have plenty of time afterwards to be able to talk to the people that have seen it with you and get information from them, contact information. You can organize yourselves. That's what this is about. It's a springboard to action. Because the white supremacists have recently started attacking a number of their historic tools. Hispanics, Arabs, black women. To many, this is a civil war within white supremacy. They think that the bad guys are cracking up. Well, to me, this doesn't look like a crack up at all. It looks more like a crack down. White supremacy is purging their ranks for the sake of purifying them. It's the same way that an army will get rid of any questionable or underperforming members before they get ready to wage a major offensive. That's what this looks like to me. Looks like they're going ahead and ratcheting up their standards so they can get rid of the guys who they know ain't got what it takes to go the distance. Gentrification is social warfare for the sake of ethnically cleansing the population of black people. And to sit there and try to talk about it as being purely about real estate, that's like saying that a military war is purely about dropping bombs. Bombs are only part of it. Sending in ground troops to take control of and hold what you're after is another part, and then installing some sort of controlling authority to administrate the territory that you've taken over is the final part. Well, gentrification works along the same means. We're seeing the ground war part right now. And on the horizon are marching the foot soldiers who are getting ready to take over the areas being attacked. I'm sure that you've seen in your own community, in black communities, you've seen white folks walking through the areas. We've all seen it. In Detroit, in East St. Louis, in D.C., you got a bunch of white folk who all of a sudden are taking an interest in riding their bikes through black neighborhoods, walking through black neighborhoods, and that means something. Because these people are not doing it because it's the fast way to work. They're doing it because they're scoping out the area. You think it's some sort of coincidence that after the good white folks begin the process of sitting here traipsing through black communities on the regular, next thing you know, there start becoming these targeted efforts to buy up certain blocks. This is social warfare. In his documentary 7 a.m., Jason Black pointed out that whenever white people sit there and build some sort of new structure in a black community, this is an economic bomb with a blast radius of 3 to 4 square blocks. And they've been just dropping these bombs for decades now, hollowing out entire black enclaves. This is warfare. Those are not grocery stores you're looking at. These are not convenience stores. These are not subdivisions or new developments. They're economic bombs. They're carpet bombing your area for the sake of moving you out. So these good white people that you see coming through your neighborhoods, that's the forward element of the invasion. Because before it's all over, the black puppet leaders who are there, or the more directly white leaders who are coming to these areas, that's going to be the final phase. That's how this all ends. It's going to culminate in the dispersion and annihilation of the black people who used to live in these areas. Now, gentrification is classic genocide because it's being propagated through resource deprivation. And once the area is sufficiently depopulated of the target residents, they will repopulate it with their own. This is how ethnic cleansing has always worked. Anybody want to tell me whatever happened to the Tasmanians? Oh, that's right, they don't exist anymore. And the Aborigines of Australia, they're at death's door. Same with the Negritos of the Philippines. Same with the Caribbeans. This is not a game when they sit here moving you from one place to the other, sitting here making it where you got nowhere to go. That is how you eliminate people. Now, you don't have to build your own economy to fight the forces of gentrification, the forces of ethnic cleansing. Your dollars don't have to come with an agenda, but Richard Spencer and his racist pals have a plan. And it is total ethnic cleansing of the black population. And the only thing that can stop a white supremacist economy is a black empowerment economy. Black people must stop being children. Stop insisting that it's always playtime. Stop sitting here going, oh, I'm intrigued by what you've said, but let me go back to the latest episode of Love and Hip Hop. We must accept and embrace that this is the age of power. Either it's going to be the age of white power steamrolling over you, or it is going to be the age of black empowerment rising from the ashes. You better stop being bored when it comes time to discuss taking control of the mechanisms of the society and putting them to work for us. When we talk about taking control of the resources and the means of production, your eyes have to stop glazing over. You gotta stop getting bored when we talk about power. Change the conversation. If you get up looking for something to amuse you, then you will amuse yourself to death. This whole thing isn't about what you think it's about. It's not about quality of living. Or who lives in a high-priced condo as opposed to who gets stuck with a slightly refurbished Section 8 hovel. It's not about who gets to live downtown or who gets to live close to the big civic gathering spots. It's not about what you may think of as community respect, because black people are hung up on that. Oh, y'all are sitting here tearing down our homes and pushing us around. Black folks, put some respect on our names. You black folks deserve some respect. This isn't about social status, stupid. This is about who's going to live and who's going to die. This is about survival. In the past, we were lucky as an accident of history. By moving from the rural areas into the cities 150 years ago, we were doing it so that we could be closer to government power because we were depending on government power to protect us after the end of slavery. And as the cities rose, they built temporary housing for the white workers who built the office buildings and the factories. But when the job was done, the white construction workers got FHA loans and moved into houses. They got to be part of the working class proper. So they got to move out of those temporary areas. And we moved into the projects. Later on, white flight led to whites abandoning neighborhoods, and without an economy to sustain ourselves, these became slums. The United States is very different from every other country on Earth. You see, in every other country, the gentry, they live in the city center, where the seat of government is, where the commercial centers are, where the headquarters of industry are located. And it's the plebes, the impoverished, the peasants, they have to live out in the hinterlands, in squalor, out of sight, out of mind. They don't get to live in the urban centers. They live out in the sticks. But in the U.S., things developed very differently. Following the end of chattel slavery and the end of Reconstruction, black people flooded into the city centers. Now, the reason that black people did it was because after the end of slavery, Reconstruction was the government essentially doing some small measure to stop white people from being able to attack black people. That's part of the reason why we prospered during Reconstruction. The government was actually doing something, not a ton, but something, to be able to roadblock the forces of white supremacy acting against us. That's the reason why white people were so furious after the end of Reconstruction. They were like, oh, you're letting the niggers compete, and that ain't what America's about. America's a white man's land. So black people who had previously received some small measure of protection from the government went to the city centers so that they could be close to the government in the hopes of maintaining that small measure of protection now that the whites had been let off their collective leash following the end of Reconstruction. And this was before urbanization and industrialization had fully crystallized and had a chance to lock us out. These things were taking form, but they hadn't fully materialized yet. So although we began our presence in the U.S. as an agrarian people, we almost literally overnight became an urban people of necessity, and we came to define urban life in the United States. All the touchstones of what you think of as city life in the U.S. were either created solely by black people, or they were the direct result of what we needed and what we demanded from the society. We are without question an urban people now, and we've remained in the cities ever since. This was more or less the scenario that we existed with up until about the 1960s, when black people started making substantive pushes against white supremacy. Notice I didn't say gains, I just said pushes against. When we started showing that we were going to cause white supremacy some problems, potentially. We weren't just going to lay down and die. At that point, it was a matter of, okay, well, we're going to have to use some more direct means so that we can finish the unfinished business of slavery. Gentrification was the plan put in place by the dominant society, formulated as a means of eliminating the threat that all of these newly galvanized black people were posing to the society, and the fact that we were about to make it clear that either we're going to get our piece of the pie or we'll smash the damn pie. Because now whites are moving back into the city centers again, and they're pricing black people out. And don't count on moving to the suburbs necessarily, because whites are fighting damned hard to hold on to their properties there. And white moneyed interests and white supremacist ideologues are demanding that the cities and states not build any more public housing. So, where do the poor go when they have nowhere to go? Now, some say that the poor and homeless are going to eventually be in such large numbers that the government will have no choice but to provide them with some sort of affordable housing. But this is a pathetic dodge. It's totally unrealistic, because it ignores both the attitude and the goals of the people pushing gentrification. This is delusional happy talk by people who either can't accept or don't care about the threat forming against black people. Gentrification has become a religion to the dominant society. They certainly know what it's about, and this isn't the first time we've seen this from them. What this happens to be is a modern form of manifest destiny, but instead of a genocidal march across the continent, it's a genocidal march across the cities. Black people have posed a political problem for the dominant society, And what they want now is a 100% solution. The white media is not going to talk about it because they are part of it. They're going to sit here and try to find a way to sanitize it, find a way to water it down, find a way to find some black people who are saying, oh, well, we made some money off of these housing properties. Why, see, gentrification is just a class issue. It's not a race issue. Get ready for them to pull out all the golden oldies to tell you that it ain't about race. Expect a few happy, smiling Negroes sitting here saying, why, I made some money off of distressed properties. So that means everything's all right. And meanwhile, these white economic bombs continue to drop. The dominant society continues dropping these economic bunker busters on us for decades, scattering what they see as the native enemy element. This is white supremacy implementing a strategy of clear, hold, and build. And if that phrase sounds familiar to you, it should. Because it's the exact same wording that the U.S. military used to describe their plans for both Iraq and Afghanistan. Those places still don't have working electricity yet, by the way, even after 15 years, but they do have working new pipelines for American businesses to pump out the oil, and they got highways to transport it to. Iraq is working just fine for the people who took it over. We are no longer a people under siege. Now we are a people under direct assault. We're no longer looking at oppression anymore. This is a full-scale extinction agenda that we're up against. We're under a slow-moving genocide, but you wouldn't know it by looking at black people, though. Hell, you would hardly have known we were even oppressed by the way that we've behaved for the last 100 or so years. And that's the reason why this documentary matters. The mission of the Intelligent Black Society, the B1 Brigade, the Black Channel, started off originally as sounding the warning, but we have passed out of the era of warnings into the era of consequences. At this point, the goal now is to take control of the discourse within the black community and to elevate the debate. That's the reason why these documentaries matter and why you need to be part of it. Because as long as black people continue to make sports and entertainment and all the stuff that you're obsessed with your reason for existing, you're going to continue to be under assault until the enemy has eliminated you. Now, I'm not sure what some black people are expecting. I suppose after hundreds of years of our horizons being limited strictly to the confines of the cotton fields, that part of our minds or our spirits that previously had been alive and active and vibrant, the very part of us that led us to explore the world and to harness its resources, the part of us that wants to explore and get the most out of the world and our place in it, has atrophied. For many of us, this necessary inherent drive seems to have died out altogether. Maybe it's the sheer number of distractions that we have today. Entertainment is more slick than it's ever been. The games and the toys are more engrossing than ever. For a person who truly wants to escape, and we do want to escape, and God knows we've got enough reason to, you can tune in, turn on, and drop out. And we have. Now our escapism has become our reality. And it's the real world that's fake to us. And it's not that we don't know the difference, it's that we do know the difference, and we've chosen escapism. We consume media voraciously, but it's always the wrong kind of media. More than any other demographic, we want to try to hide inside of the TV shows and the movies and the games. Well, there's nowhere to hide from gentrification. You will die in your amusement. Now, let's discuss the times and locations where the Gentrified documentary is going to be seen. February 11th, it's going to debut in New York City at Founders Hall, St. Francis College in Brooklyn. Then February 18th, it's going to be showing in Chicago at the Harold Washington Cultural Center on MLK Drive. And in London, England, it's going to be at Hackney's Attic, also on the 18th of February. February 18th, it's going to be screening at the Black Madonna bookstores in Detroit, Atlanta, and Houston. Also, February 18th, you're going to be seeing it in Washington, D.C. at the ARC Center Theater on Mississippi Avenue. And then finally, on February 25th, there's going to be an encore screening at the Lost Theater on 208 Wandsworth Road. Don't read about it, be about it. Advance tickets are available now. And these screenings are about more than just watching a relevant information package. Jason Black rents his venues always with a few hours after the event. He always reserves a few hours after the event so the black people there can network with one another. It's not about discussing what you saw. This isn't some episode of a TV drama. This is about now that you've seen how white supremacy is targeting you, you better start putting your heads together with some other black people, starting with the ones in that room. Because I think we've all been to events where almost before the speaker is done, some guy sticks his head in the room and says everybody's got to get out because the next function is scheduled to use the place next. Well, that never happens with a Jason Black screening, because Jason makes it a point to reserve plenty of time after the event so that black people have time to associate and network. And that's what this is going to be about. Getting information that galvanizes you and then acting on it. So I guess a more appropriate way to describe these gentrified documentary screenings is a screening and networking event. Bring your cell phone and make sure that you've got your address book app open and ready. And if all else fails, bring a pad and paper. Whatever you got to do, you make sure that you are ready for the networking event that's going to be taking place afterwards. Get people's email addresses, phone numbers, what businesses they have. If you got business cards, make sure to have them. That's what you're going to be doing after the screening. You will be setting up meetings with the people in that room at other venues. These screenings, these network events are going to be a launch pad for further action, not further debate, because the time for talk is over. You're going to be presented with the threat against you, and then it's going to be up to you to do something with the information that you've gotten. Jason's already done his part. He's given you a place where you will be in the same room with a hell of a lot of other like-minded black people who are going to be focused on the same threat you are for the same reasons as you. Nobody else is doing this. And I mean nobody else. Not merely giving you life-saving information, but also giving you the time you need to use that gathering in order to network with other black people, because you will never be more focused on gentrification than you're going to be after seeing this documentary. And frankly, at the rate that gentrification is swallowing up the black community, this is probably going to be the last time in your entire life that you're going to be presented with an opportunity to network with other black people in order to fight it. Your church isn't going to organize something like this. Your TV stations damn sure won't. There's no black social club who's going to do it. No group of black professionals. Well, what handful of black professionals we have. In many cases, they're part of the problem. Not all of them, but enough to the point where they're trying to figure out how to benefit from gentrification. Talk about whistling past the graveyard. But you know what? We don't need them. We never have. There's millions of us. If we get off the bull jive for the first time in 130 years and focus on something that matters, we can push the forces of white supremacy back. We don't have to just sit here and allow this ethnic cleansing campaign to steamroll over us. But that's going to depend entirely on what you do right now. How serious are you about fighting white supremacy? How serious are you about stopping ethnic cleansing? Go to youwillbemoved.org or gentrifiedmovie.com and plant your flag for black empowerment, not merely for black survival, but for black empowerment. Because with President Tangerine in the White House, you can bet gentrification's about to kick into high gear. This is a man who spent his life running low-income people out of portions of New York and then taking them over. In his own tenement buildings in New York City, Donald Trump hired companies who were employed for the sole purpose of harassing the tenants. We're talking about white tenants here. Donald Trump would hire companies who would use all kinds of unsavory and borderline illegal measures to try and stress or coerce these working-class white tenants into leaving Trump's housing properties so Trump could then renovate them, mostly make some minor remodeling changes. And then afterwards he gets to raise the rent by hundreds of dollars. That's how Donald Trump made his fortune. That's how he likes to get down. And now that he's president, do you think he's going to suddenly start supporting rent control? He's never done it before. He hates rent control. You think he's going to stop developers from targeting black communities? He's already gone on record saying the feds are going to come into Chicago. And when they do, what do you think's going to happen? At some point, he's going to say, you got these communities, they're all bombed out. You got these communities, but we need to build some new spots. Good places for people to live. Except what he's not going to say is to make sure that black people have places to live. He's gone on record saying that businesses are going to be allowed to do whatever they want. And what businesses in America want is to run black people out. Why do you think Wall Street's reacting so well to his presidency? The Dow hit an all-time high. They know what the agenda is. Wall Street knows what the agenda is. Money in America knows what the agenda is. Eliminating black people. And for the white investor class in the United States, that is good for business. Less black people means less competition for white people. Less black people competing economically because they're going to be too busy just trying to stay alive. The same white guys popping bottles on Wall Street right now because of Trump's policies, these are the same white guys, the very same white guys who designed this gentrification ethnic cleansing machine in the first place. See, with white supremacy, their economy comes with an ideology. Their dollars come with an agenda, and that agenda is to eliminate you and me. They have monetized their race war machine so that it's able to fuel itself. A war machine that is monetized is also a war machine that will be self-sustaining and self-perpetuating. In the United States, race war is business, and business is race war. The white-moneyed interests who push gentrification know this, and so does Trump. That's the reason why this documentary matters. You can't look to white liberals, neither for an analysis nor for prescriptions as to what to do. You can't look to the white businessman. You damn sure can't look to Trump. So, who do you look to? Why not look to one another? That's the only thing you haven't tried, and it's the only thing that's ever worked for us. You want a solution that doesn't depend on you going on your hands and knees to white people for a remedy that's never coming? Then you better start going on your feet to other black people. Because so long as you decide that you got better things to do, gentrification's going to move in on you and it will crush you. Playtime is over. If you can't get serious about this, then the next stop for you is going to be a burial plot. It's time for you to fight for your survival. That is, unless you've got better things to do. The links for where you can get your tickets, advance tickets for the screenings of Gentrified, Ethnic Cleansing American Style, the links are in the description. so that you can get your tickets to see the new documentary from Black Channel Films. These are also going to be networking events. At each venue, there's going to be plenty of time afterwards for you to talk to the other black people in the room, introduce yourself, get contact information, so that you can take what you've seen and heard and the energy generated by this event and focus it into action with other black people. You've been sick and tired of the status quo long enough. It's time to change it. And that change begins now.